Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. Once again, my guest today is Jenn Fortner, and we're going to continue the conversation that we were having last week regarding text messaging for appointments. So before we dive into that, Jenn, welcome back to the SRS Podcast. I'm so glad you could be here again.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be with you for a second week. And yeah, let's do this thing.
Let's do this thing. Okay, so I know people want us to keep going with we were talking about, how to get the phone call and text, phone call, So we'll get there, but I always like to continue to let the listeners get to know the guests just a little bit more. So last week you were sharing a little bit about your family. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so a little bit more about me. Like I said last week, I have a husband, 2 kiddos that are in the toddler stage. So they're amazing, but a lot of handful. So one thing you may not know about me, I am an identical twin. Yeah, so that's kind of a fun little aspect of my life. She's my best friend. We both live here in Springfield. Our kids play together. But yeah, I've been, happy and blessed to have grown up in Springfield and then moved to Kansas City to work with a couple of organizations there in the area of support raising. Came back here to Springfield and just set our roots down here, and we're just loving life right now. So
yeah. Very cool. Very cool. And now this is not the same Springfield as The Simpsons, right? This is a different Springfield.
Well, it depends on who you ask. So I'm pretty sure that they did a contest and they decided that The Simpsons are from Springfield, Illinois, which I was a little annoyed at. I have to admit, but it's fine. Home of Bass Pro.
That's right. The Bass Pro Shop is something, is a force to be reckoned with in Springfield. I'll give you that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the real deal.
Yeah.
And of course, you're just north of Branson, and cool. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
I've had the chance to hang out in Springfield a handful of times. It's a great place, and you're only about 2 or 3 hours from me, but we just don't seem to run into each other very often.
Yeah, not very often. Well, especially this year, right? So
right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you could join us again on the podcast, and of course, we were talking about this whole messaging for appointments thing last week. And so listeners, if you're going to start listening to this right now, I might say pause. Like seriously, you need to go back because this is very much a continuation of a longer conversation. And you're going to kind of join in halfway here, and you're going to miss out on some important things that Jenn was saying last week. So maybe back up an episode and grab that before you listen to this. So Jenn, you had asked me a question, I believe, when we pressed pause, so to speak. Yeah. And I don't honestly, in this moment, I don't even remember what that was.
We're lucky. So we were talking about, what happens if you phone call somebody several times and you're not able to get a hold of them, and then you send them a text message? What would a helpful text message sort of framework be in that situation? And I kind of answered mine, but I think we were getting into, I asked you that. I was like, so what would you say? So, yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I think I get disorganized. In fact, unfortunately, everybody that works with me in some way, shape, or form, at some point they realize, Aaron's really not that organized. I try. I really do. Even Jenn and I had a bit of a hiccup in recording this because of something that I did on my end with this organization. And so unfortunately, that's how I roll. And I try really, really hard to overcome it. But it's just not like a supernatural gifting. And so I got to have help. So I say all that not just to pick on myself, but to say, because I can get disorganized, I will really write down, I will track my communication with someone that I'm trying to sit down with. So as I am going, I will write down, hey, texted John Doe on January 1. Left it a voicemail for John Doe on January 3. Saw John Doe at church on January 5, asked if we can get together soon. He said, yes, remind me on the 7th. Or what, like, I'm going to track that stuff.
Right.
And that, first of all, that just helps me to kind of pick up where we were. So that's kind of my first big tip.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, if I just can't get a hold of someone, I'm going to do, and I think this is similar to maybe what you said last week. I am gonna text them something like, "Hey, we've been trying to connect. Do you have 2 or 3 minutes right now?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna sit back and wait,
Mm-hmm.
and then I might just kind of alternate or change up my schedule so that it's not too close. So, for instance, if I text them that and then I don't hear from them, well, I might. Now, this is getting kind of aggressive, right? But if I text them at like 10 o'clock that morning, they don't respond.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably going to be in the back of their mind. So I might set an alarm for like 7:30 that night
Mm-hmm.
that says call John Doe.
Mm-hmm.
And I might call him. And I found that in those situations, sometimes people still don't answer. But then John might answer and go, man, I am so sorry. I saw your text today. I didn't have the time. What's up? And so I'm really trying to get to the point where we have a conversation.
Right.
Or I might just go, all right, this isn't working. I'm going to have to nail John down face to face. His son and my son are on the same basketball team. We're going to be at the same place next Thursday night at 7:30. I already know it. And so I'm planning when I see John Doe at the gym to go, John, we've been talking about maybe getting together. Can we set up a time where I could share with you more about our vision and our ministry and our budget goals and how God's changing lives? Can we write that down right now, because we're having a hard time? And so I'm saving the word finances or money or budget goals. I'm saving that until we talk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that over a text. Like I'm hinting around at that, but I'm not actually flat out saying that until we can actually communicate. And I would say that's true 90% of the time. I do have a caveat. You let me know when you're ready to hear the caveat. But 90% of the time, I just don't want to save money in any way, shape, or form via text message, DM, anything like that. I want to avoid it because I'm not sure how that's going to be received. What do you think of that, Jen?
Well, yeah, I think that, I typically lean into, and there's a difference here. I think I typically lean into making sure that before we sit down, I'm not coming across as sort of Amwaying anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that term loosely, but pulling the wool over their eyes, so to speak, so they know why they're sitting down with me. And I think as long as that is communicated to where they're not going, because at one point, this is a story that I use every once in a while, but several years back, I was on a flight on my way back home to Springfield. I hadn't seen Zach in a couple of weeks. I'd been on a very long trip. And I had a friend who text messaged me, I think about a week while I was still out of the city, out of my home.
Right.
And she texted me and asked if I would get together with her and several friends. And she lives in Nashville, so there's no way that I get to see her on a regular basis. But it happened to be the night that I got back on this trip. And so I answered her and I said, and I told Zach about it. I was like, hey, this friend of mine asked me to hang out the night that I get back, but she's in Nashville and it's the only time. So, hey, is it okay if I do that? And he's like, yeah, sure. So
Right.
I'm not coming like super, energetic to hang out with her and a couple of other people that we gathered together that are friends all from Springfield of hers. Mm-hmm. So I get there and it's a juice party. I walk in the door. And I didn't know that it wasn't about friendship because she told me that it was about friendship and that we were just hanging out. And this is prior to kids, so maybe I had a little bit more energy in the pot for just hanging out with somebody. But I got there and it was let me sell you juice. And it wasn't hanging out. It wasn't conversation. It wasn't any of those things, but it was just a juice thing. And I learned that moment not to pull the wool over somebody's eyes so much so that you damage the relationship because they don't know why you're talking to them. So I think the important distinction, maybe, Aaron, is what you said is I want to share more about my ministry and vision and goals. So you're making sure that they know the crux of the appointment. It's not just, hey, let's get together for coffee and catch up. Because if you say that, then they might be into a place where they they are taken aback by the fact that you're asking.
They might even be offended because of
Exactly.
how you even set it up. So
And she was just ignorant to that, so it gave grace. But it did leave a bad taste in my mouth.
yeah, it burned
So
you. It burned
yeah,
you.
so I think it's really important to sort of make that distinction and make sure that they're aware that it is an appointment and it's not just a let's hang out and grab coffee. I want to hear
Good.
all about your life, and so that way they know that there's a purpose behind it.
I'm so glad you shared that story because I don't have to share my similar one because I have one very similar and I was coming back from a trip and I felt burned. And in fact, I don't usually feel angry about much. I was angry.
Hmm.
It was I had to make a lot of effort, go way out of my way to connect with somebody, and it was because they were trying to get me cornered.
Yep.
Um,
And
because
that's exactly what we don't want to do. And the funny thing is everybody that I coach and train, they're worried about being that. So, and I think that we unintentionally do those things by not being a little bit more upfront about the reason why we're meeting with somebody.
Well, that
So,
leads into my 10%. I said 10% of the time. I'm a little different. So here's the deal. I will do that where, and again, I don't want to do this. I want to talk with them on the phone. If
mhm,
I cannot get them on the phone, but they've agreed to a message, they've agreed to a meeting over text, and that's the only way I was able to do it, which I don't like. But let's just say that's the only way I was able to do it. I will send a follow-up text, and it's not a question, but I don't want to leave them in the dark. So I will say something along the lines of, hey, thanks for agreeing to sit down with me on the 19th. I'm really looking forward to it. Just want to be clear, I do want to catch up with you, but also I intend to share a little bit more about our ministry vision, our budget goals, and how God's changing lives. Looking forward to our hour together.
mhm,
And so there's kind of a full disclosure
mhm.
so that there's not any surprise. I'm saying, hey, we're going to spend an hour together. I am going to bring this stuff up. I do want to get to know you. And what I have found is when I send that as kind of a follow up after the meeting's already set, people are fine with that. I've
Yeah.
never had anybody go, no, forget it. But that's still not as ideal as being able to say that as we're talking because they can hear your tone of voice and it
Right.
can be a lot warmer. And so that's my exception to the rule. I
Mhm.
don't like doing that. And so listeners, if you're going, oh, that's what I'll start doing. I'll just start texting all my friends and saying, do you want to get together? And when they say yes, I'll say, great, I'm going to tell you about my ministry budget needs. Please don't do that. That is
Yes.
really not a good path to move forward. That needs to be an exception, not the plan.
Yes, 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 yes. That is, and that kind of leads me to one point about text messaging because the whole, if you listen to part one, we're talking about, asking for a face-to-face appointment via text, knowing that a lot of you are going to do that in nuanced situations, or you are simply just a preferrer of texts and I get that. And, Aaron and I have said, like, hey, we think that phone calling for an appointment is probably the best way forward. That being said, I want to share a hierarchy of warmth and relationship and asking for face-to-face appointments. So the first one would be in person, as we
Mm-hmm.
discussed. The second one would be a phone call. And this is all asking for face-to-face appointments, not the ask. I want to make that distinction very clear, but asking for an appointment. So first one in person, second one phone call. The third one would be text message. And then lastly, you get into email and then DM. And those two, you might as well cross them off. Um,
Yep.
but I think that there is a hierarchy, and so I think you need to work within that hierarchy and try to reach as high up there as you can, because the probability of somebody meeting with you depends on how you approach it. So yeah, yeah,
So I think what our listeners, Jen, are hopefully hearing here is that it's doing using text messages to set up an appointment. It's not impossible, but it's awfully easy to kind of hit a landmine, so to speak,
hmm,
and kind of blow up your chance of getting to actually have a good meeting with someone. And so we're not anti never, ever, ever, ever texting for an appointment. But the reality is, and Jen, I've heard you say this very clearly. I know I feel this way. I know that the SRS team feels this way. Steve Shadrach feels this way. People that have gone before us that know more than you or me. Let's put it that way. Um, they would all say you are so much better off 99.999% of the time. You're so much better off talking with someone when you're asking for an appointment. Ideally, it would be face-to-face. Secondarily, could be the video or the call. Using messaging, there's a time and a place, and our culture is shifting, and we get that. But if you're going for the shortcut of I'm just going to start messaging everybody, you might actually cut out your chances of getting some great appointments. So please, listener, be careful, get training, get coaching. Don't assume you know it all, because Jenn and I don't know it all. And we've been doing and living this for a lot longer than a lot of the listeners. So be a sponge, not a know-it-all, right?
Yep, totally. Yeah. So
Jenn, you mentioned your blog before. So first of all, if you have any more thoughts that we didn't hit, mention those. But secondly, tell everybody where they can find out a little bit more information about you and some of your writings on these topics.
Yeah. So, I think that JennFortner.com, and my name is spelled JENN, 2 N's, FORTNER.com. So that's the blog. And it's up from December 2020. So it's pretty close to the top by the time you read this. But, I wanted to point out that I have 3 different text samples on the blog on this particular subject. So if you're looking for how to word a good text, there is some examples on there that you can actually kind of steal from and make up your own. And some really practical thoughts and some of the things that we've shared in these podcasts, but also, a little bit more information. So please feel free to check that out. And, on the blog, I dedicate it to support raising. So there's, all kinds of topics and nuanced situations and obstacles and perspective and how to reach out to churches and all kinds of stuff on there. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's great things on there, and we have no problem promoting Jenn's blog, because actually, Jenn, I think we've taken some of your posts, or we've asked you to guest write on the SRS blog before as well. So
3 or 4 times at least, yeah.
No competition there, no competition at all. So so definitely that it's a financial partnership development blog that Jenn writes, and she's got great stuff on there. So again, that's JennFortner.com. And if you go back to the December 15th post, it's actually specifically on this topic. And so hopefully between Jenn, your writing, and our good long conversation over the past couple of weeks, hopefully we have helped people learn a little bit more about what is actually kind of a deep, a thick and deep conversation when it comes to texting for appointments. So
yes, and there's so much to say on the topic. So hopefully we scratch the surface enough.
Yeah. Well, Jenn, as is my typical go-to move, I'm just going to invite you to kind of have our last word on the podcast today. So it is yours, my friend, and then we'll wrap this up.
Oh man, well, I just want to say to everybody, you guys are, I said this last time too, but you guys literally are my heroes. And my prayer for you is that 2021 is a time of open doors and opportunities, and that our perspective remains biblical, and that God is still on the throne, even in the midst of the pandemic season that we find ourselves on. And he's not surprised by this, and he knows that you are raising your support and has called you to this time. So my prayer for you is that your heart remains strong and bold in this season, and confident knowing that God's called you.
Amen. Well, Jenn, thank you for joining us on the SRS podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisersolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining